Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank the Italian presidency for supporting the inclusion of this topic on the Council's agenda and for inviting CTED to address the Council. I'm very honored to address the Council for the first time on this urgent threat to international peace and security. I wish to begin by joining the Council and Secretary General in condemning in the strongest terms the heinous and cowardless terrorist attacks carried out just a few days ago against a mosque in northern Egypt, resulting in the loss of over 300 lives. On behalf of CTED, I wish to express my deepest condolences to the families of the victims, not only of the Egypt attack, but also of the many other attacks carried out over recent days, weeks and months in many parts of the world. As affirmed by the Council on numerous occasions, all acts of terrorism are criminal and unjustifiable, regardless of their motivation. There can be no impunity for such acts. In other terms, impunity is not an option. Mr. President, it's impossible to express the deep sorrow that we all at CTED feel at the continued senseless loss of life caused by such acts. Despite recent successes, included in the conflict zones of the Middle East, the international community continues to face significant challenges in the efforts to counter the global terrorist threat. And perhaps nowhere is this more clearly illustrated than in member states' efforts to prevent and counter the activities of foreign terrorist fighters, so-called FTFs, in accordance with Resolution 2178. Over the past 2 years, the rate at which foreign terrorist fighters have returned to their states of origin or residence or relocated to third states has accelerated as a consequence of ISIL's losses in Iraq, Syria and Libya. Over roughly the same period, the percentage of terrorist plots resulting in fatalities has increased significantly, owing in part to the activities of returnees, but also to terrorists' evolving methods, including the ways in which they use information and communication technologies. Of particular concern is the interesting trend toward attacks carried out by lone terrorists who are often guided by handlers located in other parts of the world. Attacks by individuals inspired by ISIL and other terrorist groups often require few resources, but can have devastating consequences. Many recent attacks that appear to have been inspired by ISIL, conducted in the name or claimed by ISIL, were initially required as lone actors attacks. Subsequent investigations have shown, however, that these individuals received support or resources from elsewhere, often via the internet or social media. Terrorists are also increasingly using new technologies to transfer funds to such individuals. Mr. President, since its adoption in 2014, Security Council Resolution 2178 has been fundamental to the efforts of member states to address the FTF threats. Member states have made progress in many areas, but major challenges remain. In other terms, a lot has been done, but we are not there yet. For example, fewer than 60 states have so far introduced measures requiring airlines to provide advanced passenger information, the so-called APIs. This means that it remains very difficult for over 100 member states to check for the possible presence of FTFs on board aircraft flying into or out of or transiting through their airports. Many states require assistance in establishing the necessary connectivity between national databases and border posts. They also continue to face legal challenges relating to transfer of data, protection of data privacy, and the establishment of the necessary legal and administrative frameworks. The creation of an adequate legal and administrative framework is indeed a precondition for the establishment of such programs, and many states will continue to require guidance in this area. International cooperation continues to be undermined by practical and political challenges, as well as by inconsistent compliance with human rights obligations. States should also do more to downgrade and share intelligence on FDFs and those who return to their countries of origin or relocate to third countries. Efforts to bring suspected FDFs to justice continue to be undermined by the difficulty of collecting sufficient admissible evidence from conflict zones. Our assessment analyses show that very few states are able to do so effectively. Member states also continue to face challenges in implementing effective strategies to disrupt the financing of returnees and small cells. Some have not yet designated FDFs in their national asset freezing mechanisms. Many states will continue to require assistance in the development of effective prosecution, rehabilitation and reintegration strategies, as well as tailored approaches to deal with women and children. We must therefore continue to work tirelessness to build on the progress achieved since the adoption of Resolution 2178. Mr. President, CTED assessment and analyses show that adoption of Resolution 2178 has nonetheless mobilized the international community. Member states have introduced measures to strengthen their border screening process to identify FDFs. Information gathered has placed governments in a better position to track the return or setback of nationals who have traveled to fight in conflict zones. Many states have criminalized FDF travel and as well as the organization and financing of terrorist groups and improved domestic interagency information sharing. Progress has also been made in strengthening international judicial and law enforcement cooperation. Central authorities for mutual legal assistance and extradition have been established, and 24/7 focal points on FDF issues have been appointed. Resolution 2178 also underscores the need to engage local communities and non-governmental actors in developing strategies to counter violent extremism. It also encourages states to address the conditions conducive to the spread of violent extremism, including the empowering civil society. CTED is engaged in a number of initiatives aimed at strengthening member states' efforts to counter violent extremism pursuant to Resolution 2178 and other relevant Council resolutions. Since the adoption of the resolution, CTED has conducted 45 assessment visits, most in states that are among those most affected by the FDF phenomenon. CTED has also facilitated a number of hands-on activities in advance the resolution's implementation and to identify common challenges and gaps, emerging trends, and appropriate responses and solutions. Pursuant to Resolution 2178, CTED has drafted 3 analytical reports identifying gaps in member states' legal frameworks and institutional and operational structures, and proposing a set of recommendations on ways to address those gaps. The Counterterrorism Committee, with the support of CTED, has also approved a set of guiding principles, the so-called Madrid principles, which offer a holistic, forward-looking approach to the implementation of flexible prosecution strategies, combined with appropriate alternatives to prosecution, including administrative measures and/or reintegration and rehabilitation programs, used in a manner compliant with international human rights law and national legislation and subject to effective review. The principles also serve as a guide for the formulation of national counterterrorism policies and strategies. CTED has also continued to work closely with its partners to identify the core elements of an effective approach in implementing 2178, as well as good practices. Those elements and good practices have been incorporated into CTED's updated technical guides in the implementation of Council Resolution 2178 and other relevant resolutions. Since the adoption of Resolution 2178, CTED has also facilitated and engaged in numerous activities with its implementing partners to tackle specific challenges associated with FTFs. Those activities include the facilitation of assistance delivery to highly affected countries following visits of the committee, as well as a number of regional or global activities, including a regional program with UNODC for the Maghreb countries, a global program with UNODC and the International Association of Prosecutors on gathering digital evidence, a joint CTED-UNODC initiative aimed at assisting member states of the Lake Chad Basin for develop approaches to prosecuting, rehabilitating and reintegrating persons associated with Boko Haram. CTED has also continued to strengthen its cooperation with Interpol, including on the use of biometric data and implementation of ICAO Traveller Identification Programme strategy, which addresses biometric verification processes, quality control, management of errors and exceptions, and effective reading of biometric travel documents at the borders. CTED has also worked closely with ICAO to develop an international standard requiring all ICAO members to implement APIs and conducted deep dive missions in high priority states funded by the United Nations Counterterrorism Center to advise their governments on the development of API systems. The effective development of use of biometrics, API systems and passengers' name records systems remain key in the detection of FTFs and terrorists and returnees. Mr. President, if we are to continue to make progress in promoting and implementing the provisions of the resolutions, we must continue to strengthen the partnerships between and among member states, UN agencies, and partner organizations. Or to put it another way, it takes networks to beat networks. As the Secretary General noted earlier this month in his London statement, which was already referred to by Under Secretary General Voronkov, there is an urgent need for governments and security agencies to collaborate far more effectively in fighting terror, with respecting human rights. I wish to assure you that CTED will continue to give its full support to the efforts of the Council and the Committee to assist Member States to prevent and counter the activities of FTFs and other terrorists, and to bring the perpetrators of terrorist acts to justice. And I do thank you.